Good morning, everyone. I could say that because as of this recording, it is 11:30 a.m. So, good morning, regardless of whatever time it is that you're listening to this. My name is Bear, and this is the Odinic School of Mysteries podcast. Thank you so much for listening. It really means a lot that you've taken the time today. Before, I know it's kind of a clickbaity title, and we'll definitely get into it. Just real quick, if you have any questions, because I'm sure you will after this video, please feel free to ask them below. Of course, just make sure that it's family friendly. And beyond that, I don't really have any rules or expectations for what questions are asked. What questions are asked. So not this month, but next month, I'm going to try and do Q&As live. I've never done a live video before, so it's going to take a lot of research on my behalf to figure out how to do that, but that's going to kind of be the next step. Also, I want to start making myself a lot more accessible, so I'm starting a Discord channel for people who want to just hang out and visit, and I'll be on there really whenever it is I'm at my desk. So if I'm not recording or something like that, I should be on the Discord channel. And so, I like our little community we have here. We have it's full of good people, and it'd be kind of cool to get to know people on a lot more regular basis than just, or an email or something. So look forward to that. I will put the login information below in the description box of this podcast or video, depending on how you're listening to it. We've actually switched. So the Odinic School of Mysteries podcast is now on Anchor, ANCHOR.FM, if you are interested in catching us there. Anchor also has an app you could download. And we're also on Spotify, so you can look us up on Spotify. We're not on iTunes yet. I'm working on that, but we'll be on iTunes hopefully before too long. Anyway, you could look for us if you like listening to us as in podcast format. That is the best place to do it. Spotify or Anchor.fm or via the Anchor app or Spotify app. Let's see, is there anything else? So live Q&A in the future and the Discord chat. And the fact we're on Anchor and Spotify under the same name as the Odinic School of Mysteries. Okay, now that we got that annoying stuff, business stuff out of the way, I want to address a question that I get a lot. And Mr. Linux Noob was the most recent person to ask me this. And that's the question is, how does the people in the mysteries know that the gods are coming back? No, I've said that offhandedly a couple of times, and to be frank, it's perfectly natural for someone to say, "What now?" What? Say again? Come again? So I want to take some time and just kind of dig into this. I got a lot of time here to just sit, and I have my coffee, and I hope you have your coffee, and so I think we should just go ahead and dig in. So there's a number of ways, and this ranges from the common run-of-the-mill stuff we find on YouTube that is pretty easy to uncover, to stuff that is a little bit more esoteric, and into the stuff that is pretty. When it comes to proof, it might be kind of lame. So there's a kind of a gambit there of ways. So the most direct way that we know about this stuff, and is the least compelling, so we'll start with this, is that simply that we were just told. We were told that the gods are coming back. My teacher approaches me and says, "Bear, the gods are coming back." It didn't quite go like that, but Um, but that's not really something that is really, um, what's the word I'm thinking of? That's not really something that's really good television, I guess you could say. Right. That's not something I could just say, oh, hey, you guys, guess what? This guy you never met told me. Um, so, but I wanted to get that out of the way. That's one of the, um, that's one of the most, even though it's the most direct knowledge I have of this, it's also the least compelling. Does that make sense? Um, my teacher thus far has never been wrong. And again, that's not really something that, as a person who doesn't know me, who doesn't know my teacher, and who isn't really a part of the school per se, it's not really going to be all that compelling, and it's not really going to convince anybody. And actually, that's something I should probably state right off the bat. I'm not trying to convince anyone here, right? This is not. I'm not a conspiracy channel, right? What I do here isn't conspiracy theories. It's not what I do. I don't do clickbait. I talk about mystery school philosophy. That's what I do. We talk about symbols. We talk about dying god myths. We talk about this kind of stuff. So I am not going to present this information in a way that is going to try and persuade anyone in any direction. That's not what I'm about. You will believe whatever it is you want to believe regardless. So just putting that out there, there's no expectation of belief here. I just want to answer the question as best I can. So yeah, the least compelling and let me try that again. The least compelling way I know is also the most direct way I know, is that simply its word has come down from the chains of commands that are above me, right? And chains of commands aren't even really a good way of putting it. It's just the easiest way to illustrate how it works. The people who are more into know and who are further along the path than I am have given me what they know. Okay? The second way we know, and this goes into a lot more of the space that it is well occupied on the streets of YouTube and other mediums, and that's the conspiracy angle. I'm sorry, I said conspiracy. I meant prophecy, is the prophecy angle. So, before we even get into the prophecy, I think it's better to talk about cycles of time. Nothing in the universe is static. Everything moves, nothing stands still. There is no such thing as status quo. It doesn't exist. There is no status quo. Everything is always in flux, and there's an old Greek axiom. I think it was Greek. It's probably come from the Hermeticists. They had all the great sayings, but the saying goes, all things are in the process of becoming. Meaning that from the sands of the sea to the birds, the animals, to us, to businesses, to societies, to nations and worlds in aggregate, and the solar system, everything is being pulled through time in a way that makes things more complex and bigger as it goes along. Right? You don't start off, you start off as something, but as time goes, you get bigger and bigger and bigger and stronger and stronger and stronger as cycles of time progress. So, and there's a number of ways we can measure time. Time in the sense that we all think of time, which is by measuring days, hours, years, that sort of thing. But the way the ancients measured times were through cycles, and particularly astrological phenomenon, watching the stars, watching the planets, watching cycles of the moon. The moon was a really big one because the moon is always on schedule and it has a very definite cycle to it. So as for short-term clocks, the moon was used a lot. Seasons, of course. But if you, let's see, how do I explain this? So consciousness comes in waves. There's this old saying about light. What is light? Is it a wave or a particle? And the truth is, well, it's both. It's both a wave and it's a particle. And consciousness kind of operates on a similar but different paradigm, where as cycles progress, waves of consciousness come and waves of consciousness go, like waves on a seashore. And you, at some point, you could, even just in recorded history, you could see the crests of civilizations. You have a wave of high consciousness that will come in, and a civilization will go up, 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 and then it'll crest. And just like a sine wave, like if you're measuring amplitude and currency and all of that, just like with electricity, it'll make that curve, and then it'll fall back down, way down, and then you have that curve that kind of comes back up. And these happen. It's a bit. The trouble with this is it's easy to make this more complicated than it needs to be. But cycles are fractals, right? So you could, no matter how far in you zoom or how far out you zoom, you're going to see the same pattern. But roughly speaking, for our benefit, we'll say 2,000 years or so is between 2 and 5,000 years is the way that these consciousness cycles go. They'll go up, 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 then they'll crest, and then they'll go back down, up, 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 up. And then you hit the bottom of the trough, and then you come up. The gods always end up showing up when consciousness gets really bad. When things kind of get to their lowest points, the gods show up, and then there's a steady climb all the way up, and then they start to crest again, and then the gods will leave, and then we'll have a fall. Like there's the last really big one is when people believe Christ was here. The last time a god was a wisdom god was present on Earth, and you have a really high people's ideas about God and about civilization, and you have all these. I don't remember when. I'm trying to remember when the burning of. I can't remember if Alexandria, the Library of Alexandria, was before or after Christ. I should look that up real quick. Do you mind if I look that up real quick? I don't want to be rude here, but I don't want to give you bad information. Because I feel like it happened after, but I don't want to. When was the library? Okay, it was 48 BC, so it was just about a little over 50 years before Jesus was born. So we have, and that kind of makes sense. So you have all these high knowledge bases, right? You have these really high, when consciousness gets to a certain level, there's this law that says all things will kind of break down and will fall apart once things get too orderly. We see this with metal. Like, I was a welder. I was a trained welder. And one of the things about metallurgy, is that if the metal is too pure and the crystalline structures in the metal are too perfect, the metal becomes brittle and it'll break. It makes for a nice sharp blade, for example, but it'll chip really easily. You have to put soft metal in there, to keep it from breaking. And this happens all the time in nature. When things get too orderly, they break down. You have to have a little bit of chaos mixed in there to keep cohesion set, and so things don't break up. And so, like what we see here, like with the 48 BC, with the Library of Alexandria, we have this thing where people reject knowledge, people reject gnosis. The idea of wisdom and knowing things become hateful to a society. There's like that saying in Romans, thinking of themselves wise, they became fools. Their foolish hearts were darkened. They they invent ways of doing evil. They do all these horrible things. They approve of people who practice evil things. When consciousness gets to a point, they start burning down the house. They start rejecting anything that will enlighten them and bring them up out of a carnal underworld state of being. And we see this here. So you have, they hit that bottom, clunk at the bottom. They burn down arguably one of the most precious things the humans ever had, the Library of Alexandria. And then 50 years later, the wisdom god shows up, and then we have kind of a steady climb. And I'm not saying it's a good climb, but it was, you have kind of that crest that happens there when the wisdom god comes, and there's this big upsurge in knowledge and wisdom, and the mystery school systems kind of come back for a little while, and then you start the steady climb back down again. And so it comes in these waves, and we're due. We're at the bottom. We're right about at the bottom of the crest. And so by understanding these cycles of time, by understanding the patterns, by observing the past, you could see the future. There's a saying I heard just the other day that says that if you live long enough, you see everything twice. Or you lived a long time when you see everything twice. And it's the same principle. If you are wise, you observe the past, because observing the past will predict the future. There is nothing new under the sun, as the saying goes. And even people like the Sitchin hypothesis. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Sitchin. He's the Zecharia Sitchin. He's the guy who did he's the Anunnaki guy. He's the guy who really likes the Sumerian. He transformed the Sumerian cuneiform tablets, and in a very radical way, which changed the way people saw these ancient documents, where it's like, these aren't just, his belief going into it was that these aren't myths, these are history. And he was one of the first people to propose very radically, and he got some serious shit for saying this, but he was one of the first people to say that the gods were essentially like a class 2 civilization. And they came and they had such high technology that it seemed magical to the people here. And they kind of took over everything, and we're here for a long time to mine minerals and that sorts of things. But even with him, and I don't really need to, I'm not really prepared to go into, which would be actually a good video or podcast to do someday about all that. But I don't want to dig into the Sumerian stuff today. But he talks about these cycles of time in his hypothesis, and that what the Sumerians believed, with the coming and going of Nibiru, the big planet of the wait for it, of the Sumerians. Jesus, I'm sorry, I can't. For some reason, my brain just turned off. I was like, I just it just went. Foot. I'm having fun. I hope this is going okay. Like I said, I'm not doing this to convince anyone. I'm just trying to answer a question. So one of the biggest ways outside of, we'll say like the conspiratorial realm, is a knowledge of time and the cycles of time and consciousness. We could kind of delve a little bit into the prophecy side of things. A really good resource for this actually is the Bible. People are, when they know that, we're a Norse mystery school, they always get rather surprised when we quote the Bible. And we don't have anything against the Bible at all. We don't. The Bible's just fine. We hold to the belief that the story is what's important, not the dogma. Anyway, the Bible talks a lot. One of my favorite parables that are kind of dealing with this is the parable of the wheat and the tares. A person who is fantastic to listen to, actually, if you have the chance, is a woman by the name of Nania. I'll be sure and link her channel below. I'm going to just write that down so I don't forget. Nania. She does a lot of you have come over from Jacob Israel's channel. He's a really good friend of mine, and they have a very similar way of doing scholarship. Well, they'll take a translation of the Bible, they'll look at the original Hebrew word, and then go back and find all the different words that are associated with that, and in that sense, kind of reverse engineer the way the Bible was interpreted, because a lot people are surprised by exactly how many of those words in there are filler, that were just added later to make it make more sense. Surprising number of those are filler words. Anyway, but she and I, we're kind of in agreement. There's a passage that deals with the wheat and the tares, where you have these, where the way the story goes is there's a farmer, and he goes out and he plants his crop of wheat, and his enemy, being a dick, went out there with seed and planted tare seed out in the farmer's field. And so the wheat is starting to grow up with these weeds, basically, these really obnoxious weeds. And so the servants come to the farmer or the master, and they say, "Master, what do we do? Do we pull up the tares?" And the master says, "No, leave them alone. Let the tares grow up with the good wheat, because if you pull them up too early, you're going to destroy a good crop. So what we do is we wait for harvest time. And when harvest time comes, we separate the wheat from the tares so we could burn the tares and store the wheat." So there's this big sorting process that happens. Many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with Scariest Mover Ever channel. With KJ, he talks about this quite a bit. He quotes this same story. It's a very famous story. Similar story as the sheep and the goats. Actually, I think it was in the same. It might have even been in the same passage where he discusses the sheep and the goats, where the goats go one way and the sheep go the other. And this could be explained a lot with just knowledge of science and the way vibrations work. When you have an enormous bunch of energy that's coming into your system, right? It's going to make changes. All energies are sympathetic to each other. So that means, what does that mean? It means that if you have something that vibrates very high and vibrates something, and if something is vibrating really low and it's dissonant, meaning that it doesn't resonate at the same, at a complementary pattern, they will either three things will happen. So either the most common way is the higher energy thing being hit with this lower energy thing will bring that energy down. It'll bring the higher energy down to meet the dissonant lower energy. And the lower energy will start to kind of even out a little bit and rise. And then so they kind of neutral each other out in that way. But if the higher energy is strong enough, if it's powerful enough, what it'll do, a little bit like throwing a pebble in a pond, it'll create these heavy waves that come in and will just wash the lower energy out of the way. And it's a very violent process. And it doesn't destroy the dissonant energy, it just pushes it away. And so consciousness, one of the things that we talk about a lot in the mysteries is that consciousness is sound and light. It's sound and light. That's why raising your consciousness is such it's a very new age way of putting it, really. But it's saying when you raise your consciousness, you're increasing the vibration, the rate that those neurons or so are firing. They go faster and faster and faster and faster and faster. And the faster they go, the higher the vibration, the more light it produces. So I got to distinguish here for a moment the difference between the brain, for example, and consciousness. In this sense, they're two different things. And we could go into that again at some other time. We don't have the time now. And so when you have the gods coming back, if you have an enormous amount of energy input that's coming into a closed system, the solar system, for all intents and purposes, it's not a closed system in the sense of a circuit, but it's a closed system in the sense that it's like its own little island out here. And you have this huge ship that's coming in and it's creating this big wake. It's going to start messing up all the different ecosystems that exist within that set of that island chain, right? And so when you, like vibrating sand, you have heavier stuff on one end and you have lighter stuff on the other, and you vibrate it, the sand is going to stratify, and it's going to, the coarser stuff is going to fall, the lighter stuff is going to raise, and then you create a separation of wheat and tares, so to speak. And so by observing the way that the consciousness of a population is occurring, you could see pretty clearly that there's a big energy source that's coming into the solar system. And you have, and we see this, you have a big fall, a big consciousness fall with half the population, it seems. Where all the things that Jesus was talking about in that passage are coming to pass. The essentially adopting, for lack of a better word, the satanic worldview. The satanic worldview is the worship of egos, the worship of self at all costs. So the worship and gratification of taboos and self-worship, self-indulgence. What I want is what's most important, and I should get what I want at all costs. And whoever isn't me and mine gets destroyed in the process. And that's the satanic worldview. And we see this playing out right now in the way, I mean, just crazy stuff. I mean, there's an article recently about how vampires should get the same status as, it should become a protected class. I wish I could, if I could find it, I'll link it below so you can look at it. And I might forget, so don't hold it against me. But it was like, it's like, dude, the whole adrenochrome scandal, which is horrible. I don't want to go into it really much here, but look that up. The adrenochrome is pretty bad stuff. Rich people taking the blood of younger individuals to blood transfusions in order to raise their lifespans and stuff. I mean, we're the glorification of, I mean, everything from like sacrifice to, the worship of darkness to, I mean, it just goes on and on and on. It's all the same stuff we talked about. It's that dump, where you go all the way down into that bottom trough of that sine wave. But that's important. We have to get there. And I'm sorry to say that, but you can't, there is no reaching the higher consciousness. There is no getting up there as a society without things getting so bad that that the clock needs to flip over and then we start that climb again. Because just like things are too orderly, we talked about it a minute ago, when things get too orderly and those crystals inside the metal get too perfect, it becomes brittle and breaks. If the metal is too soft, it also breaks and becomes useless. Right? So you have to, there's that perfect middle ground that you have to harden up the metal and so you can get to the really good stuff at the very top. So that's just kind of the way the cookie crumbles. We really can't get to where we're going without going through the darkness. And this comes back to the dying God myth. It's fractal. You have to look at it as a fractal way of looking at it, where the dying God myth of the individual, you die on the world tree, you fall into ignorance, you see the runes, you wake up, achieve gnosis, and then climb the world tree up into heaven. Societies and the world has to do the exact same thing. It has to hit that bottom, suffer in the underworld, see the light, and then rise again. That's the pattern. It has to happen. And then at some point, you reach the top of the world tree, and then you fall off the bugger. And then you have to start the whole process all over again. And, but this is why, but you never, so here's the thing, you never fall quite as far as you did the first time. And that's the important thing. You never fall quite as far as you did the first time. So maybe a cycle or two ago, you fell and you were a dog or a cat or a bear or something like that. But this cycle, you know, you got to as high as you're going to go, and then when you fell, you became a person, right? And then maybe next time when you fall, you would be, I don't know, an Anunnaki. I don't know. I don't know. A space alien with super technology. I'm not sure. But so, you know, that's why time and the cycles are actually referred to as spirals. And a sine wave actually is a spiral. You're just looking at, like a slinky. It's like looking at a slinky from the side, and you see the sine waves go up and down. That's actually it's a spiral that you're looking at. So when you fall, you don't really fall the same way you did last time. So that's good, unless they say that if you do something particularly bad, maybe you'll get set back a cycle or two. But you know, that's not as easy to define. So for the prophecy side of things, you know, we see that, and that coincides with the space race, which is the other thing I have written down here. I'm not very old. What am I, 32? I always forget how freaking old I am. I think I'm 32. All my life, they're always like, no, we're not going to go to the moon. Screw space. We've been there. We've done that. You know, the only reason we went there in the first place was to beat the Russians. But there's no reason for us to go there now. We're sure we'll launch a space satellite, you know, and maybe we'll go tinker with the space station or whatever. But, you know, we're not gonna go to the moon again. That's what everyone kept saying. I mean, you could go look up NASA interviews where people are saying, so where are we going? When are we going there? And they're like, darned if I know, we're not going anywhere so far as I know. And then within the last 5 years, since 2012, December of 2012, and is when it started, but it really started picking up around 2016, right around the election, where suddenly and inexplicably every nation on Earth was tripping over themselves to get to space for no reason. And there's all this weird shit. You know, we started kind of getting to more of the conspiracy territory. But suddenly everyone was trying to get to space. And countries who never had a space program, or a very minuscule one at best, were suddenly developing space programs and are trying to get to the moon and to Mars. It's like suddenly, like they saw something, and now everyone is scrambling to get to space and arm space. It's ridiculous. It's like something happened, and now everyone is trying to get there. You have solar observatories all over the world, like every single one of them going down all at the same time for a week at a time. You know, it's just a lot of these things just kind of all fall into place at once. And that's kind of, and this is kind of what I'm getting at, is that if you're to take just one of these things, cycles of time, the space race, prophecy, you know, the wheat and tares thing. We didn't even go into Revelation, any of the stuff with that. You know, the Sitchin hypothesis. If you just take one of these by themselves, it's not very compelling, right? If I just said, my teacher told me that the gods are coming back, that's not very compelling. And admittedly so. Right. That's not really something that's going to convince anybody. But when you start looking at all the stuff that's all happening all at the same time, it's really, at some point, you have to start saying, okay, there's something to this pattern. There's something going on here that isn't adding up. Climate change, right? A hot button topic right now. It's been for a long time, but it's been a hot button topic since the 80s. But really the 70s. But what they don't tell you, and if you're someone who really likes listening to science news, you wouldn't know, is that every planet in the solar system is experiencing climate change right now. Every single one of them. Jupiter is releasing X-rays. No one knows why. I'm sorry, not Jupiter. I'm sorry, Pluto. Pluto is pumping out X-rays. It's just a rock. It doesn't even have a core. So why is it producing X-rays right now? The storm on Jupiter is likely to disappear in the next 50 years. It's been there for untold millions of years, and now suddenly it's just starting to vanish. Poof. It's just, you go all the way down the line, increase in sunspots and solar activity, earthquakes on Earth, huge storms. These are not symptoms of just, I know I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, but it's not symptoms of carbon emissions, right? It's something that's way, 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 way bigger than that. There is something with an enormous amount of energy that's coming into our system. And we could have debates on whether or not you think it's Nibiru or what. But all signs point to the fact that the gods are coming back. And that goes all the way from people having visions to climate change to sunspots to everyone trying to get to space. One of the things we talk about in the mysteries a lot is trying to find causes, because effects can be confusing. We can see a lot of different effects. But if you could find one cause, if you could find the one ring to rule them all, then suddenly all these things start to make pretty good sense. Why is freaking everyone losing their minds? Right? Why is everyone losing their minds? Why is Jupiter losing its storm? That big red spot on Jupiter, why is it shrinking? Why is Pluto exhibiting X-rays? Why are we having so many earthquakes? Why is that? Why is everything so weird right now? I'm not a conspiracy channel, but speaking for myself personally, I gotta say that the gods coming back makes a lot of that make a lot of sense to me. And I'm speaking from someone who believes in the gods, right? If you're an atheist or whatever, this will all sound like nonsense, of course. But like I said, I'm not trying to sell you on any of these ideas. I'm just trying to explain my rationality for saying what I'm saying. And that's the gods coming back. These are all, if you understand energy and you understand vibration, and all of this is explainable by that. We're starting to hit the bottom of that sine wave. And that hitting the bottom of that sine wave always triggers the return of the gods. Almost always. Almost always. Sometimes they're here for a long time. Sometimes they're here for just a short time. Usually you have, again, fractals, but usually you have all the gods here for a long time, but separated, but those events are separated by thousands of years. We'll say like 500,000 years, for in between the gods being here for 100,000 years or something like that. So, but then in between, you have all these little punctuated events where the lesser gods are here kind of in between, usually the wisdom gods. Jesus, Thoth, Horus, Buddha, these folks. So, I'm perfectly cognizant of the fact that this isn't going to change anyone's life, I don't think. By that I mean, this isn't going to convince anyone of something that they weren't already prepared to believe. And my presentation style isn't very organized anyway. And I think if I took the time to actually do a slideshow, maybe it would be better. But I don't, like I've said before, I've said over and over again that the reason I don't do that is because the mysteries have always been meant to be taught orally and taught person to person. And this is the easiest way to reproduce that with this medium. And this is the most organic human way to do it. And so there's a reason why I do it this way, not get too fancy with it. It's pretty good coffee, you guys. Anyway. So there's a lot of things all happening at the same time that kind of point to that. And there's another way we know. This would be my last point. And again, this isn't I don't know how to put it. I don't know. This is a weird one. All right. This is a weird one. But people have noticed the return of the daemon. Not demon. Daemon. D-A-E-M-O-N. They sound similar, but they're different. Demon is a modern derivative of the original Greek word daemon. But they mean different things. Right? A lot of these things that we get afraid of because of modern parlance and modern understanding of things were not held by the people who originally invented the words for them. But the original Greek daemon was basically the voice inside your head that was your teacher. And it kept trying to get you to do good things to improve your life. Not a demon. Okay. I have to be because people are going to take this the wrong way. And there's so much freaking baggage attached to the word that it's going to, I risk losing the whole show because people are so attached to the baggage. Drop your baggage so you can understand the truth. Okay. Just put it down and just hear what I'm saying. Because I could hear people's thoughts in my head while I'm saying this. Daemon. It's different. Anyway, the daemon. Socrates talked about his daemon, and he only did what his daemon told him to do. It's this thing that, like, when you go into like a meditation or something, it'll have people notice his voice sometimes. That will show up if you become receptive enough to it. And it'll say something like, you need to change your diet. You're not getting enough sleep. You need to walk barefoot more often. You need to go sit in the rain. You need to spend more time cooking for your family. You're not being receptive enough. The list goes on and on and on and on and on. You got to quit smoking. Got to quit smoking cigarettes. It's the return of the still small voice that the Bible talks about, where God, if that's what you want to call it, will speak to you and teach you and help you grow into something better. And it's the return of the still small voice that seems to have been missing, but has suddenly come back into people's lives. And, it's been interesting. Like, I've coached some people, I get emails periodically with people saying, okay, I want to get better. Can you tell me what I need to do? How do I start the process? And I'm like, okay, well, start meditating. And it's kind of interesting. Without any prompting, a number of times people will come back and saying, oh, well, I was meditating, I was hearing this voice. And it wants me to do X, Y, and Z. And I think I'm going to do it because it's it's really good advice. If I just take its advice, my life gets better. And again, we could even call it something else. Well, we could call it the conscience. We could call it the conscience. So it's not so much baggage. Because people get so freaking... In this way, it's in these ways that Christianity has really done a number on people. Christianity as a religion has done a number on people. Has filled people with really bad information. And, people, they are afraid of what they do not know, and they will not research what they fear. How many people will go back, look at the original Greek, and figure out what the original Greek word meant? Most people won't. Most people won't. But it's just is what it is. Because I said daemon and it sounds similar to demon, people go, oh no, it's talking about demons. Oh my gosh, it's just, I don't know. I do what I can. I do what I can. I just have to laugh. I'm rubbing, if you can't see me, of course you can't see me, but I'm like rubbing my forehead and it's like, I could just hear it already. Anyway. Yeah. In the sense, the still small voice that seems to have come back. I believe the gods are coming back. And so there's a lot of reasons beyond my teacher just telling me so. And he's yet to been wrong. And so, so the next question that's going to happen, what always happens, is people say, Bear, so if this is true, when is this going to happen? I don't know, frankly. I have my guesses. This is okay, so here's the thing. You have to be willing to be wrong, right? You have to be willing to be wrong. And God knows I do not know enough about this to give any time frames. I don't. Nothing I say is going to be accurate. Okay? Let's just put that out there. Nothing I say is going to be accurate. With that said, And this is just my personal thought on it. This isn't based on any mystery school doctrine I've ever learned. This isn't based on any prophetic teaching or anything like this. This is just, what I'm about to tell you is just me, puffing on some pipe tobacco in my underpants, sitting in my chair going, I wonder if this is what it is. All right. There's nothing more to what I'm about to say than that. So don't take it as gospel. I'm not trying to convince you. I don't even think it's accurate. I have my suspicion. All right. I have my suspicion that, that things are really going to start picking up around 2024. I think things are going to start picking up around 2024. And there's a number of reasons for that. I think Trump is probably going to be elected again. And I think the Antifa types are going to lose their freaking minds. I think there's going to be a lot more Trump is evil rhetoric coming to get people in a space where they can lose their minds, and then when he gets elected, shit's going to hit the fan. And so we're going to, we'll have about 7 years-ish of peace, and then shit's going to hit the fan, and then we'll have a time of pretty severe ugliness, and then it's going to flip over, and the gods are going to come back. That's my guess. Like I said, I want to qualify this. It's not based on any special knowledge or inside knowledge or anything like that. My teacher hasn't told me anything about it. I haven't read it in any secret scrolls. This is just, this is the kind of shit you talk about with your cousin. You have a beer, you talk to your cousin, you're like, I don't know, maybe this time or this time. This is what this is, right? This is just my own personal guess. It's not based on anything fancy. But if they're not here by 2024, my guess is that they're probably, the events that precipitate their coming will probably be around 2024. But it's just a guess, my parents, I remember hearing them talk about, there was a guy who convinced half the nation that the world was ending. He was a mega preacher, and he convinced half the world that the world was ending, and it didn't happen. So about every 10 years or so, people think the world is going to end, and it keeps not ending. So I'm perfectly aware that this is very possible. And I use the term ending hyperbolically, right? By the world ending, I mean the shit hits the fan, so we could start climbing the sine wave and things get better again. That's what I mean by the world ending. It's not like everyone's going to die. It's the switching over to a new cycle, which is what 2024 was. It's the beginning of a new cycle. What did I say? I don't know what I just said. 2012. I don't know what I said there. 2012 was a flipping over of a new cycle, right? It clicks over and a new clock begins. When I say the world is ending, that's really what I'm saying, is that a new clock is beginning. I don't want to freak people out, because people will take you like super seriously, and then they don't do any thinking actually for themselves. They'll just take what you're saying as gospel, and then we'll run with it. So special thanks, Mr. Linux Noob. Thanks for asking your question. I'm really glad that you asked that question, because frankly, I didn't have any plans. I had no idea what I was going to do this video on. this podcast on. So thank you for that. I really appreciate it. I want to say thank you to Kelly Monahan. She was my first Patreon on Patreon. Thank you so much. That was really sweet what you said. I really appreciate that. So special thanks to her. If this organization, I guess if you could call it, that we're building is totally donation based. If this is something that has helped you and you want to help us pay for some web hosting, there's various ways of doing that, including Patreon and Subscribestar down below. I'm having some trouble with my PayPal account for some reason. They're being kind of turds. So I'm still working on PayPal, but Subscribestar and Patreon links are below if that's something you're interested in. Let's see. Oh, so one other thing. So on Anchor and on I lost it. What was the other one? It was Anchor and Spotify. I got my first, Anchor had agreed to be my first sponsor. So if you listen to the podcast there, at least long enough to hear the little half-minute ad at the beginning, you also help support the channel because they pay me a penny. Seriously, it's like, I didn't realize the way that advertising works, but they pay per 1,000 views. So I make $15 per 1,000 views. So help me out. Help me make that penny. I'm laughing because it's just so awesome. Okay. Well, I'm having fun. I don't think there's anything else. Again, if you have questions, please leave them below. And I'll see you next week. All right. I love you guys. Bye-bye.